In homogeneous social structures, the family, with a male at its head, carried the shared genes and the shared memes of the tribe or of the group. In other words, the same principles, traditions, values, the same history. The leader in such circumstances was the representative of the entire tribe in both race and principle. He was the epitome of the group's shared past. In heterogeneous social structures, the family is detrimental to social cohesion, as is anything which hints at a past or introduces an element that contradicts the immediate or the present. Trying to integrate individuals from varying genetic and mimetic backgrounds requires a leveling of all into the lowest common denominator. It also requires a slandering of the past or its reinterpretation in ways that adheres to the current without contradicting it. In this case, species identity is the only identity permitted. All of the sources of identification, such as race, sex, tribe, heritage, culture in general, are slandered and belittled into silence. All is civilized in the sense that it is made shallow, immediate, conforming to the prevailing norms of non-distinct servitude. To control a population's future, you must control its access to this future. Females are such access points. Through her womb, an entire genetic inheritance, along with its values, morals, and rituals, is passed on. When a certain population with particular values is denied its access to its own future, it is denied a destiny. Taking away females from males of a certain ilk is part of a systemic control which is eliminating all resistance to its nihilistic power. By seducing females into modern Judeo-Christian nihilism, now morphed into a form of secular humanism or liberalism via the avenue of Marxism, a cultural heritage can be slowly filtered out of the gene pool, replaced by this ubiquitous nondescript civilization with no culture. An uncultivated automatization where humans are reduced to body parts or to their utility as specialized automatons, maintaining the mechanisms as just another part of them. Therefore, these so-called MRAs, turning their backs or proposing this seedless vengeance against females who have simply become agents of mimetic filtering, plays into the system's tactics. The system wants you to stay out of its future if you still hold on to any designation of identity which is not rooted in its authority and its standards. Sexual identification being one such designation, particularly the male type. The male which confronts and challenges all authority, and the one which carries its heritage like a badge of honor, resisting all assimilation into shallow ideals, is the one that must be eliminated. If you pay your taxes and follow the laws, it does not matter what you do with your sexual organs in your spare time. In fact, given the antithesis to feminism these types of men children express, this loyalty to their sexual distinctiveness makes them undesirable and ones that would preferably be kept outside the gene pool. Them turning their backs, quote unquote, on females or reducing themselves to a sexual organ with no mind and no capacity to propagate this mind and all that it carries, does the system a favor, in fact. Except for this obsession with their sexual identity, these men children show a distaste for all other natural designations, and so reveal themselves as being nothing more than disillusioned byproducts of a civilization they support in every other way, except in this case. MRAs simply expose a dissatisfaction with the consequences of female emancipation and their return to primal sexual behaviors. They naively once believed that freedom meant a return to some form of purity or of goodness, the so-called noble savage, where fair play and justice would reign supreme. And what they got was a slight taste of the cruelty of nature, as it is expressed through female sexual choice and female sexual attraction. Their solution entails exactly what was intended by this emancipation of female sexuality from the masculine middleman. It entails the exclusion from the bloodlines, which favors more feminine dispositions. What remains of their masculinity now turns inward into a kind of homoerotic introspection, trying to appear or trying not to appear too vindictive nor too feminine in its adoption of female political attitudes. Feminism is a return of sexual power to females, but this time directed not by a genetic code, but by a mimetic one. Females are turned from genetic filtering mechanisms into mimetic filtering mechanisms. They are now under the influence of a religious or political code which governs their sexual selection, so that they're not really liberated at all. The shared interest of church and state, once a hallmark of civilized living, is now secularized further by eliminating the spiritual anthropic principle and keeping its most abstract form, the state or the institution. This is what the separation of church and state is. It's in effect the elimination of spirituality from governance. God is made into an idea or an ideal, and paradise is turned into a utopia. The beyond reality, the supernatural, is simply postponed and projected as a coming future. Marxism, which had promised a paradise on earth under the same Judeo-Christian morals and values, has now changed monikers and calls itself liberalism or humanism, or by one of its many reincarnations as transhumanism, the Venus Project, this uniformity produced by technological compensations, leading to some kind of Star Trek obliteration of all natural identities. The individual is now deemed free because he or she is unburdened by a past now corrected by technologies. And of course, when we talk about nature, what we are talking about is the sum of all nurturing, of all past nurturing. So in effect, we're talking about the past. Nature is another word defining or describing the past. This method is not perfect, and so there is some internal struggle occurring in females as they try to integrate their genetic predispositions, as it has been, as it has evolved through millennia of evolution, into their mimetic training, their brainwashing, their education, their peer-pressured behavioral adaptation to the current. The discrepancy between genetic and mimetic adaptation produces internal psychological friction, a confusion which may express itself in a form of schizophrenia or result in the self-protective defensive form of narcissism, this peering into one's navel. They call this process maturation, where the term mature describes the desirable final capitulation to social normality and a settling for the socially ideal male in line with the social conventions, exemplified by his access to resources, i.e. status, luxuries, wealth. The ideal male is now an indoctrinated one, an emasculated one which carries the symbols of his social adequacy and his natural inadequacy in the form of luxuries, monies, and other cultural symbolizations. He is nothing if not a symbol himself, a puppet of institutional masculinity, an empty husk overcompensating his loss in multiple displays of hypermasculinity. In this case, we are dealing with a meme, which is anti-nature, anti-life, and anti-distinction. Males, up to one point, could be bad boys, spreading their seed around, exploiting female promiscuity and female dispositions. But the system closed the door on that. Human husbandry is also a process of advancement itself. So it's constantly correcting its previous mistakes. We call this progress. In these times, the so-called bad boy is held accountable for every child he seeds, and so his sexual activities are restricted by his wealth. And of course, wealth is something which is acquired by being docile, reliable, a worker bee fully in tune with the prevailing social rules. So we see here the contradiction, the conflict. The final expression of masculine supremacy is now erased within social contexts. All that is allowed are useless sportive events, themselves contained within sheltering controlled environments, childish games to release all that masculine energy as it is slowly diminished and filtered out of the gene pool or redirected towards servility. This allows for only a few other options for males who do not fully buy into the modern nihilistic lie. Drop out, seclude yourself in an artificial reality, or become the sterile, purposeless man-whore mirroring female purposelessness and promiscuity. It is the barren aspect which suits the system fine. Hedonism and materialism in all its glory. The so-called playa, the player, is reduced to a mere sex organ with no creative or procreative potential. A fornicating member, that is, in reality, shooting blanks. Sex loses its spiritual character, and by spiritual I mean the historical, becoming this hedonistic escape with no meaning. Sex loses its severity, its risks, its costs, its shared commitments to a past, and the bonding this results in. Its secularization makes the participants expendable, coincidental, recyclable, throwaway pleasure machines with no character or characteristics other than their organs. Its purpose of procreation is already moderated, and the technologies it spawned, as in the family, have become antithetical to uniformity. This is why paternalism has become a dirty word. Paternalism manifested in maintaining traditions despite the present and the immediate. It was a resistant ordering in the chaotic entropy. You see, in the past, a male was a carrier of his heritage. He was a representative of his entire bloodline. Females were introduced into his bloodline as means towards an end, injecting it with new genetic material to propagate the same mimetic material. The male was a carrier of his past, his traditions. Females were exchanged between bloodline, stolen, fought over, all because they were a way of propagating a bloodline and because they easily took to any authority and to any form of order. This is what had to be stopped, and destroying the family through feminism and this liberal anti-nature crap was a way to do so. If now males who have no heritage, no genetic quality of their own, not any at least to be proud of, and not any that they wish to preserve, are proposing these universal reactions to modernity, which are in line with it, then this too should be understood as being part of this all-leveling process, where no distinctions are allowed if they do not come from the system itself. There is, of course, a third option, in addition to the two already mentioned. It is a more difficult and risky one. I will not go into the third option because I prefer to allude to it rather than to state it outright. Those who get it, get it. Those who don't should never be told.